Wow.
Welcome, and we are ready to start.
Hey there, everyone. I'm Kyle Kittleson. I'm going to be moderating today's extremely knowledgeable and insightful panel of experts. But to start, we have the CEO, the lady who put it all together, Teresa. Teresa, thank you for being here and welcome to your own event.
Thank you, Kyle. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the conversation about raising resilient girls. As you heard, I'm Teresa Edie-Keeney, and I have the great pleasure of being the CEO of Girl Scouts of Greater Los Angeles. And one of the many things I love about being part of the Girl Scout movement is access to our Girl Scout Research Institute. Their sole focus is to learn about what it's like to be a girl in today's world. And most recently, Girl Scouts has become deeply concerned about the stress, anxiety, and depression, and other mental health issues that girls and their friends are experiencing. So the Research Institute took on the topic of mental health in their latest study called Girls Speak Out About Mental Health. And because being a girl-led organization is part of everything we do at Girl Scouts, the Research Institute's process included girl co-researchers who were involved in all stages of research alongside the team at the Institute. And today, it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to one of those co-researchers, Girl Scouts of Greater Los Angeles, Girl Scout Ambassador, Research Institute intern, and a member of the G team, Naomi. Hi, Naomi. Can you share with us your experience with the Girl Scouts Speaks Out about mental health study?
Absolutely. So thank you so much for that generous introduction. And I am so excited to share a little bit more about the research that we did. So we are a team of 25 interns from across the United States, as well as an international team. And to really, because mental health is an international and is a global issue. And what better way than one of the largest research institutes, not only in the country, but in the world, the Girl Scout Research Institute, or GSRI. So really, this idea came from surveys and having questions with girls of not what do we think is important, but genuinely what is affecting you in your day-to-day life. And the answer to everything was mental health, because it ranges from a variety of things, whether it's just anxiety from going back to school in person or wondering about your future, what college might look like. Mental health affects everyone. And so we really wanted to dive in deep of, well, what does it mean to be a girl and experiencing mental health during this pandemic? And so we actually did this research just this summer in 2020. And so we found a lot of things correlated with mental health and COVID. And so a lot of people were feeling anxious about going back to school in person. A lot of people were feeling worried about what their education might hold. But more importantly, we brainstormed solutions. And so some of our solutions that our amazing panelists are probably going to talk a little bit more in depth today, it starts with having conversations, just like what we're doing today. And so that is why I am so excited for this 3-part series with GSGLA, because it is a much needed conversation. And we can say all of these things, but without action, that's what we need. And we need action. And that's exactly what Girl Scouts of Greater Los Angeles is doing today. But I encourage all of you watching is that the conversation doesn't end here. The conversation continues in your home. The conversation continues with your Girl Scout troop leaders. It continues with your Girl Scout members and people as part of the community, because we are stronger when we collaborate and have conversations about things that matter. And so with that, I think I'll be handing it back to Teresa as we just continue to dive in depth to this meaningful conversation.
Thank you, Naomi. You are amazing and such an inspiration to me, to the council, and to your sister Girl Scouts. And you and all the girls are the reason why we wanted to do this series. But it is now my honor to introduce our moderator, who you just heard from, Kyle Kittleson, who will guide us through this event. Welcome, Kyle, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. Well, let's dive right in and start with a poll for our audience. We're very curious to see which children in your life, the ages of those children. This is going to help our panelists really give you a more specific and actionable information for those demographics. So it's up on your screen right now if you can. And panelists, you can participate in this poll too. I have no children, so I can't really participate, but I do have a dog. But go ahead and participate with that. While you guys fill out the poll, we are going to show a video, and this is on the effects of loneliness. It features a psychiatrist out of New York, Dr. Sue Varma. So when we're ready for that video, let's go ahead and play that to start off our first segment here.
Loneliness gap, and loneliness is now being called a public health epidemic because it's not just affecting an individual, it's affecting a whole society. And we're finding that the subjective feeling of loneliness is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes per day in the way that it affects our health. It increases our risk for heart attack, for blood pressure, for obesity, for depression, for anxiety, for cognitive decline and dementia, and our risk of death. It increases our risk of death by 30%, this subjective feeling of loneliness.
Very powerful statistics there from Dr. Sue Varma, and no question that this year more and more of us have experienced loneliness, perhaps really for the first time, and that certainly has affected our children. One of my favorite people on the entire planet, and soon to be yours, is triple board certified forensic and neuropsychologist, Dr. Judy Ho. Dr. Judy certainly is an expertise when it comes to a variety of mental health disorders, anxiety and depression being one of them. Dr. Judy, I'd like to first welcome you to this event. Thank you. I know you sit on the board now for Girl Scouts of Greater Los Angeles. Very exciting. One of the participants messaged with this question asking, how is it possible that we can be surrounded by friends and family for an entire year and still feel lonely and isolated? Dr. Judy.
Well, Kyle, it's always great to work with you and such a pleasure to be here. I'm so glad that Teresa asked me to be a member of the board. I'm so glad that I was accepted into the board, and we're doing this amazing program where we get to really interface with everybody on all of these current issues. So loneliness is a perception. And when we look at studies of loneliness, it's not really about the number of people that the person has access to. It's not about how many friends they seem to have. It's about the person's subjective experience of whether or not they feel like they're part of a community, that they feel understood, that they feel like they have trusted people they can go to when they have problems. It's really about how they feel and how they perceive whether or not they're still alone in the world. And oftentimes people can be around lots of people, living in a household of 8 and still feel very alone. And that perception of loneliness is what drives all of those research statistics that obviously we're trying to curb. The statistics that loneliness actually equates to medical conditions, that it leads to increased obesity, increased heart conditions, even increased mortality. On the emotional side, perceived loneliness relates to depression, anxiety, a difficult time managing stress, and also, unfortunately, more isolation. When people are perceiving that loneliness, they feel sometimes ashamed, sometimes guilty, sometimes like they don't have a lot to contribute to a social environment. So then they actually go more inward into themselves. And that actually is something that we really need to address, because that social isolation leads to all other types of emotional struggles. And we really do need to help all of our young people with that right now.
Absolutely. Speaking of young people, let's go to the results of that poll to see if any age group really sticks out as being predominant here for this discussion. It looks like more than half have children in their lives from the ages of 9 to 12. Let's go to our next guest to talk about that a little further. Dr. Amy West is a clinical child psychologist. Dr. Amy, thank you for being here, our first time meeting. Oh, you are on mute, Amy.
Sorry. Yes. Hello. Thank you. I'm so
Hi.
thrilled to be here.
Wonderful. Now, in that demographic, ages 9 to 12, how could you start to see some of the symptoms that could indicate that that child is feeling lonely or is isolating?
So, I mean, I think you'd want to look out for any changes from baseline. And so in general, as psychologists, we're always looking, it's kind of natural and normal to have, a certain amount of mood swings, to have kind of responses and reactions to stressful events. What we look for when, we're really noting or on the lookout for kind of concerning changes in behavior are consistent changes in mood or behavior that really represent a shift from baseline. So, I think, again, we're in a pandemic. Well, hopefully we're coming out of a pandemic, but we've been in a pandemic. This is a time when people have been more socially isolated, at least from broader networks, of their communities and their peers. And so you would expect, there to be a little bit of a different experience, and to note kind of, different, slightly different kind of feelings and behaviors around social interaction. I think, if we're really wanting to know, is our child lonely or experiencing a concerning level of loneliness? I mean, first of all, I would look for what your child is telling you. Sometimes, and they may not come right out and say, I'm lonely, but they may say, I miss this person or that person. I miss this
Right.
teacher. I miss my friend. I miss, there's certain kind of verbal cues that kids may give you that, that are really indicating that they're feeling a loss, that they're missing people, they're missing things in their lives. Certainly I think if there are behavioral changes towards, towards further isolation, withdrawing, kind of not participating in social interactions, even those that are available to them, or the things that usually bring them pleasure. Those, I think when people feel lonely, they tend to kind of withdraw even further into themselves, because they're not feeling connected. So, and adults do that, kids do that too. So if you notice that your child is just becoming a little bit more internally focused, withdrawn, they don't seem to kind of crave and seek out interactions with their peers, with the outside world, that might signal that I think they are feeling lonely and are starting to kind of withdraw into themselves in ways that need to be addressed.
Part of that sounds like natural behavior I would expect from a 12, 13, 14-year-old. I don't want to talk to mom and dad. I want to lock myself in the bedroom. I am going to self-isolate. How do I, as a parent or caregiver, recognize that this is normal, typical teenage behavior, as opposed to, wait a minute, my child might really be suffering from loneliness or isolation? How do I determine the difference?
Yeah, so I'd say a couple of things. One is it gets a little bit back to like shift from baseline, right? So what is your child typically like? And if they start engaging in behavior that is not typical for them, that might be a sign of concern. Although I will say that when kids developmentally emerge into adolescence, you're going to see shifts in behavior. That's part of the normal developmental course. So, that it's possible that it may be, typical development, and there is still a shift, in the kind of baseline behavior. So, in addition to that, I think I would also look for symptoms of kind of depression and anxiety, because that, when loneliness becomes problematic, it's most likely going to manifest as anxiety or depression. So, is your child or your teenager, seeming really sad and moody, crying more easily, withdrawing, not wanting to participate in activities that usually pleasure them, bring them pleasure? Appetite changes. Are they sleeping more or less? Do they have difficulty concentrating? Do they just seem more hopeless and helpless? Are they having panic attacks? Are they, evidencing excessive worry. Like those would
Sure.
all be signs that something a little bit more clinical.
Well, and
might
I
be
love getting
going
the
on.
baseline behavior first. And I think sometimes that could require reaching out to other people who have relationships with this child, coaches, the other parent, other caregivers, maybe trusted friends and family members, because sometimes our kids, like I have a kid, but sometimes I hear from parents that kids are not coming to their parents being their full authentic selves. And so it's hard to get a baseline when somebody can't show up fully like that. So getting that outside perspective could help in getting that baseline behavior determined, so that if there's a change from that, we know where we're going. Really, really wonderful insight. Donna's here. Hi, Donna. Thank you for being here.
Hi
Donna is
there.
a parenting journalist, author, speaker, and nonprofit founder. She's taken what she has learned as a journalist and also as a teacher to really help parents. That's why you're here today, Donna. Here's a question for you. We're hearing from our Girl Scout parents that a lot of children are basically coming out pretty aggressively with some over very small things. Like during dinner, they might get the wrong plate and say, this isn't the plate I use, or if you're looking at your child playing, they say, stop looking at me so weird. What is going on here? And how do we recognize when these are just outbursts and when these could be, when this could be a sign that there is something more troubling going on?
Hi, Kyle. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Hi there, Kyle. So just so you know, look, I'm a mom to two boys, 12 and 13 years old. So I am living this right now.
You are
with
in
all
it.
of you parents out there. But really, one technique that I think is really important to think about and to remember right now is to really allow our kids to feel their feelings, because their feelings are valid. And I like to talk about the fact that we could be these emotion scientists. And when we do that, we're really, really thinking about how our kids are feeling. And I actually wrote a picture book about this. It's called Dear Me, Letters to Myself for All of My Emotions. And it's research-backed and evidence-based. And basically, it's a way to identify these emotions. And there are steps to do this. So when a kid is acting out and not feeling the way they normally do, the way that they are with their friends or with their family, what we want to do is we want to go through some steps with them. And the first step is to identify that emotion. How are you feeling? Are you frustrated? Are you angry? Are you mad? Those feelings are valid. So identify those feelings and emotions. And then you move on and you feel and understand those emotions. Where are those emotions coming from? And then you can use these techniques. Look, we want to be proactive in teaching our kids about mental health and well-being instead of reactive. So if we can teach some techniques as far as mindful breathing, these deep breaths, or journaling or drawing. These are things that can help these kids identify their emotions, work through their emotions, and then move on to a more positive emotion. But of course, we have to allow that time and space for that to happen, but really thinking about how our kids are feeling, giving them the space to feel those feelings instead of saying, you know what, just stop what you're doing.
Yeah.
Instead say, hey, what's going on? How are you feeling? What is that feeling that's coming from you right now?
And I want to point out how great it was how you delivered that, because it's no secret that we should be asking kids questions. Okay, like we know this, but how you did it is very different than how I think a lot of us fall in the trap. I have a 3-year-old nephew. I will find myself seeing him and go, oh, how are you doing? He's 3. He doesn't know how he's doing, and that's such an innocuous question. What does that even mean? So I have to make that mindfulness decision. And like you just said it so passionately and so beautifully, how are you feeling? And what does that feeling feel like? Are you feeling sad? Okay. What does sadness feel like? Now you're really asking quality questions to this child, and you're getting them in the driver's seat of their mental health, which is so powerful. It's beautiful. It was one of the first things I learned on Med Circle was the power of asking the right question the right way. And I'll share some unsolicited advice or opinion of my own, but don't practice in front of the kid. If you're really wanting to talk to your teenage boy or daughter or whoever about how they are at school, you have to really practice how you're going to ask that, how you're going to say that. Because if it comes off inauthentic, like you don't really care, like it's something on your to-do list, they know. Okay, we all knew when we were teenagers. Nothing's changed since then. They know. Really excellent. As a reminder, we do have a great chat going on in the chat section. So if you're watching this live, feel free to interact with other members, and lots of our experts and panelists are interacting there as well. I would like now, I think we have time for one more question. This will go to Dr. Amy, if you don't mind. A lot of parents who were previously cautious of screen time have given their kids lots of screen time. And now they feel a little guilty about it. Should they feel guilty? Where are we at with screen time?
No, parents should not feel guilty about more screen time.
Okay,
Absolutely
okay.
not.
All right.
We are in survival mode. We are not in optimal parenting mode during a pandemic. And I think, my strongest message for parents would be to just take some of the pressure off of yourself. And, I think as parents, and, I'm a parent of a 1 and a 4-year-old myself. So I have been living this, during the pandemic as well. And we, just tend to have such perfectionistic standards for ourselves. And, this is not the time to be aspiring to optimal parenting. We are trying to make it through an incredibly stressful and traumatic experience. And so we are surviving. And, if part of what we need to do as parents to survive is let our kids watch a little bit more screen time, that is fine. It is totally fine. Screens are not evil. Of course you want to have some parameters around screens. I think what I would say is, as parents, we still want to convey the message that like we're in control, we make the rules around screens, even if it's that a lot more screen time is allowed. We still set the boundaries and the parameters. So if there are no screens during meals, if there are no screens after 8 p.m.,
right.
that's fine. I think we want to convey that there's still some containment around screens, but absolutely, I think it's fine if the overall dose of screen time is a little bit more. I would also say, obviously you want to monitor what your kids are watching. Not all screen time is equal. So the more we can kind of have our kids engaging in higher quality, like educational shows or developmentally appropriate shows versus just watching YouTube videos all day long. Although, YouTube videos are fine, but again, it's all about balance and, just kind of creating as much opportunity for kind of quality interaction with screens.
Sure.
And then the last thing I would say is just try to create some balance. I think by creating balance, it kind of inadvertently decreases screen time, right? If we decide on weekends we're going to get out of the house for 2 hours a day, or we're going to try to read with our kids for half an hour every night, or I think by proactively kind of planning and engaging in other activities, which is more and more available now that things are opening up. I think it's more possible to kind of start re-engaging kids in other activities. Like that is automatically going to kind of decrease their screen time and just put them into context where they're not able to access screens in a way that's going to be helpful without kind of demonizing screens and turning it into a battle, when everybody's at home.
Yeah, it really makes sense. For all the girls out there who are feeling lonely and their parents either know this because the girls have told them, or parents sometimes just know. Teresa, I would love your insight as somebody who works closely, obviously, with Girl Scouts, but also a parent yourself. What can you do? What have you found that works to really show up for them, the children?
I knew I would do that once during this panel.
Everyone gets one.
We all get one of those. That's such a great question. Well, honestly, I think just being present half the time. I have all girls and I work with all girls, and I've never experienced girls having a lack of talking or conversation. But I think sometimes as a parent, And as a person who is very busy, with many demands, that sometimes we're not listening fully. And I think listening with compassion, and I think legitimizing, going off of what Amy was saying earlier, legitimizing feelings. All feelings are okay, not all behaviors, but all feelings are okay. So
Yes.
just letting them talk and being a good listener, I think, and practicing your listening skills,
Yeah.
to me has been a very, very helpful in making those connections.
Yeah, and it really does make all the difference, when you can really become that compassionate, active listener. You are providing something so valuable to the recipient. I mean, we all know how we feel when somebody is not on their phone. You can tell they're not thinking about anything else, and they are just here, right? You just got them. And there is a feeling that comes with that. And when that feeling is given to you by a parent or a caregiver or a guardian, isn't that even more special? When I have my dad's undivided attention, I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, I have my dad's whole attention. What do I get? But if I have somebody's attention, on an airplane, maybe less impactful. But that is a true superpower that we all have to give to our children and people that we care about. Wonderful. Dr. Judy is now going to bless us with something that I've done many times. I cannot speak highly enough about it. This is an active part of today's virtual event. So get out your piece of paper, or at least get mindful in this moment, because when you learn about value-based living, woo, things get better. Dr. Judy, take it away.
Thank you so much, Kyle. And this is one of my favorite activities too. I have been responding to some of your great questions in the chat. Please keep them coming. And there's actually a couple people who've been asking about, how do I take care of myself? How do I reduce loneliness? Well, this is going to be one of those answers for you, something that you can add to your toolbox to help you to have a stronger resilience for yourself. And it's actually a great activity to teach your kids too. So we're going to talk about values-based living. What is that? Well, values are very different from goals. They are not things that you can check off. They're not just things that you can cross off of a to-do list. They're things that are really important to you in the ways that you want to live your life and how you want to be remembered by when people talk about you in conversations where you're not there. And in this society, oftentimes we think about happiness. I mean, there's so much literature on happiness. Everybody wants to be happy. Who doesn't want to be happy? But we're very focused on a very narrow definition of happiness. And actually, there are two forms of happiness. The first form is the one that we're most associated with in the media and what everybody tells us happiness is. And this is the feel-good kind of happiness that's really based in sensation pleasures, like joking, laughing, having a great meal, your first moments of vacation, your first big paycheck, or the next several ones. And this form of happiness, though, is ruled by the law of diminishing returns, meaning that it doesn't really last longer than a few hours at a time. Sometimes people also associate this form of happiness with the definition that there should be no negative emotions happening at the same time. So lots of happy feelings, positive feelings, no negative ones. But there is this amazing other definition of happiness, and you really need both parts of happiness to really thrive. And the second form of happiness is values-based. This is the kind of deep gratification and joy that you experience, the sense that your life has meaning and fulfills some larger purpose. And this represents more of a spiritual source of satisfaction. It comes from this deeper purpose and your values. And this form of happiness, amazingly, is not ruled by the law of diminishing returns. So there's actually no limit to how meaningful or how purposeful your life can be. So a little bit more about values. This is all about what you want. This is personal to you. There are no rights or wrongs. It's what you like to stand for and be remembered by. And values give you your sense of purpose, and they really are unique to each person. I could have a value of honesty. Kyle could have a value of honesty. So could Dr. Amy, Teresa, and also Donna. But each of our specific definitions of what honesty looks like might be slightly different. And that's a very common way when we talk about values being unique to the person. You don't achieve a value, but you act consistent with it, and you choose freely to move or not move in value directions. So one analogy I like to use is that if goals are like the off ramps or the signposts or the little stops along the way that you're taking, The values are the direction that you're traveling. So eventually you go and you pull off and you visit a monument or you have dinner, but then you get back on that highway and you keep traveling in that direction. So it's a continuous process. When we align with our values daily, we have more energy, we feel more fulfilled because we're leading from what's important to us. And the most cool thing about values is that when you have clarity about them, it gives you a guide for action during challenging times. And that reduces overwhelm and gives you a great sense of consistency in your day-to-day actions. Values really do guide your short-term goals and strengthen your internal motivation, even when things get tough. And conversely, when we don't align with our values, we feel less authentic and we can become demotivated about our daily lives, and everything feels like it's a little bit more difficult to do. So we are going to do this together. I am going to show you a handout. It has 33 common values. There are thousands of values in the world, but this will get you started. These are common values that people ascribe to. And what I like you to do is just don't think about it too hard. Read through the 33 values and just jot down your top 5. Okay, so number 1 would be the most important, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then if you have time, also rank the bottom 5 with -1, -2, -3, -4, -5 being the very least important to you. Again, think purposefully, but don't overthink each choice. This really should feel intuitive. And again, there are no right or wrong answers. And so here is the list of 33 values. And you can see here that I have also written just a sample definition. Your definition might be slightly different, but this will just give you a sense of what this value might mean for a person. And again, rank your top 5 and your bottom 5, jot that down, and we'll talk about what we're going to do with this next. So I'll give you guys a few minutes to do that, and then we'll talk about what this means and how you can use it in your daily lives. And maybe just 1 minute more. And again, if you don't get to rank your bottom 5, that's okay, but make sure you do have your top 5. So as everyone is finishing up, I just wanted to talk about why we are doing this. We want to identify your top values because then we can really help you to cultivate this more longer lasting version of happiness, this purposeful, this values-based happiness that happens sometimes even when we're in the middle of the most difficult times of our lives, that we can still experience this form of happiness. And this form of happiness doesn't always come with positive emotions only. Sometimes there's some negative emotions mixed in there too, which is really what the human experience is all about. And for those of you guys who have watched Inside Out, it's one of my favorite movies about the complexity of emotions, but it's that idea of some of the most beautiful memories in life have like a mixture of emotions. It's not just all positive emotions. It's some sadness sometimes mixed in there, some regret, some anger, but then also there's a lot of positive emotions also in some of the most valuable experiences that we have in our lives. If you think about some of the most valued experiences you had in your life, like raising a child, starting a new career, taking on a new challenge, it doesn't only come with positive emotions all the time. There are negative emotions as well. And for those of you guys who are willing to share, I would love to see you type into the chat what your top 5 values are, just to kind of see what everybody is feeling right now. Which are the top 5 that you've identified for yourself? And the reason why we ask you to identify the bottom 5 is because then you'll know the types of things that just aren't really worth your time. When you're feeling overwhelmed and you have a tendency to overcommit, knowing what your bottom 5 values are is really helpful for making decisions. So what are some other ways that you can put these values into action? Because we're all about the action plan today. And there's a lot of different ways that you can, now that you have identified your top values, can put these into action in your everyday life to reduce overwhelm and to cultivate more resilience, teach your children about resilience, and also be able to create more deeper senses of happiness and joy for yourself. And we'll go over each of these tips. The first tip is don't commit to a goal unless it actually aligns with one of your top values. Again, it's all about simplicity. There's so many things that we could commit to. Everything sounds good, but if you really think about whether or not this goal comes from you and your top values versus if it's just something that you're jumping on the bandwagon because you don't want to disappoint somebody or everybody else is doing it, that can really help you to cut down on how you commit to goals and how you go about actually achieving them. If they are tied to your top values, even when the going gets tough, it is much easier to motivate yourself and have that willpower. My second tip is to think about it and think about your values before making big decisions. Sometimes when we are overwhelmed, there's a lot going on. It's harder for us to make the everyday decisions, especially bigger ones that might have more consequences. So these are the 5 steps to take before a decision. First, review your list of values, paying attention to the top 5. Then ask yourself this question about the value you have listed as number 1. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest, how well does the perceived outcome of this decision or opportunity align with value number 1? Then write down the number. After that, ask the same question about each of the top 5 values on your list. And after you've rated the perceived outcome of this decision or opportunity for each of your core values, add the number up and find the average. The last step is to evaluate the score. Your aim is to get a score of 7 or higher on average. If you score below 7, the decision or opportunity may not align enough with your values for you to go in that direction and not have this second guessing later. And if you use your values to think about your decision-making process, it will make you so much more efficient in making difficult decisions, because you'll always be able to say, I know that I had a very thoughtful approach to making this decision for myself. The third tip is to check in with your values daily. This is ideal if you can just, think quickly about, hey, like, how did I meet those top values today? And if daily feels like a little too much, that's okay. You can try weekly. I like to do this on the way home from work or at the end of the day. I ask myself, how well did my decisions and behaviors align with value number 1 today? This really only takes 2 minutes, but it provides you with a good sense of what to improve the next day. So let's say one of my top values, actually it is one of my top values, is community. So at the end of the day, I might ask myself, well, how well did I really honor this value of community today? And I think, wow, like I really have just been working so much that I haven't connected with people in my community. Okay, well, I'm going to recommit to this value tomorrow, and I'm going to make sure that I call at least one friend who I haven't touched base with in a long time just to connect and see how they're doing. And this really helps you to keep focused and in touch with what's really important to you. And again, build those sources of deeper joy. The fourth tip is to purposely remind yourself of your values. It's really great to have a sensory reminder of your values in addition to the list that you now have. This keeps them front and center in your mind. So here are some creative ways to remind yourself of values on a regular basis. You can create a screensaver that represents one of your top values. You can write your top values on a Post-it. You can find a picture that represents one of your values and keep it somewhere where you'll see it daily. Or this is my favorite, I like to create a values playlist where for my top 5 or 10 values, I'll kind of rotate different songs with each song representing one of those top values. And then I'll just play it when I'm working out, cleaning the house or whatever. And that just helps me to remind myself of my top values and keep them front and center. And tip 5 is to try to design your self-care with values. So you can design all kinds of self-care activities based on your values. And here's a template that I use, and you're going to get a copy of this at the end of this session, where you can put together your own self-care plan. Self-care plans generally include 6 domains, and I've listed them here on the left: emotional, practical, physical, mental, social, and spiritual. And so you can list your top 3 or 5 values across the top of the page, and then think about different activities that might align with those top values that fall into each of these areas. It's also important at the end to rate your enjoyment of that activity once you've done it, because sometimes something sounds really good, and then once you do it, well, maybe it didn't bring you that much relaxation and joy, so maybe next time you'll try something different. And if you have this template and you just make sure that you set aside 15 to 30 minutes for yourself a day and really modeling that for your children and even bringing them into the process, this is going to be a really great exercise for you to stay centered. Does anybody have any questions about values-based living and some of the tips that I talked about to keep this front and center every day?
I am sure that people are typing in some questions right now. While they do that, Dr. Judy, yes, you will all get a copy of Dr. Judy's slides in an email tomorrow. If parents were going to do this exercise with their children, are there any modifications or something special they would need to look out for to accommodate the younger age?
Well, all of the ones that I described are actually perfect for children. And I think that sometimes it's more just about the instructional approach. If it's younger children, you might want to keep it really simple. And you can start with the things that are sensory based first, because all little children understand sensory basis, right? They can draw a picture of their top value. They can certainly help you create that playlist. They can pick the picture that they think represents courage or honesty, and you can put it up in their room. So I think that in terms of the tips of how to integrate it, that's probably a really great place to start. And then another tip about reviewing your day and saying, okay, one of your top values is community. What did you do today to honor community? And you can just have that conversation even at the dinner table. I think that that's appropriate for children of all ages as well.
We have another question from a viewer asking, how do you express your values to your kids without being pedantic?
Well, I think that it's just helpful to communicate that, you're not necessarily trying to, you're not trying to tell them what values like are great or not, because really, again, you might have a good idea of what values you want to impart on your children. But again, we've talked about how values, there's no good or bad values. Everybody is free to have their own. So I think the best thing to do is to actually explain why these values are important to you personally. And then you can engage your child in that conversation. Well, how does that sound to you? Do you think that would be an important value for you too? Why or why not? When you feel like you're maybe getting too pedantic, it's always just good to open it up and ask questions instead of making a statement.
What about for children who may not even understand what a value is yet? How do you communicate that to them effectively?
Great question. And I think, we talk about values being the things that bring them meaning and makes them want to get out of bed and get excited about their life. And values is that experience that they have where later on, when they recall what was the best part of your week, those are the kind of memories that rise to the top. When you think about the best moments of your life, those are usually those values-based moments. And
Yeah.
so I think that's another way to explain it to your children. Like, what makes you excited to get up in the day? Or when you think about what was the best part of your week, what are the experiences that you've had? And we call these experiences peak moments. These are moments that kind of stick out in your mind that like really represent these really amazing, joyful times in your life. And when you talk to your child about recounting it, you ask them what they liked about it. It's a great way to then say, oh, well, it sounds like what was really great about it is that you were with all your friends. So maybe top values is community.
Yeah, because my nephew's top value is dinosaurs and candy right now. So I'll have to explain that to him. Let's go into some more questions. I'm going to throw this to Dr. Amy and Donna. You both can answer it, or if one of you feel particularly strong, let me know. But we have a viewer asking, what if I'm the one struggling? What can I do so I can limit that impact it has on my children?
So I'm happy to start, Donna.
Sure.
I feel super passionately about this particular topic as a parent and as a psychologist who works with a lot of parents. But I think, the first thing we need to do as parents in the situation that we find ourselves is just to acknowledge that we are suffering, that we are struggling, and that's
now what does that
okay.
mean, acknowledge? How do we do that? Is that to ourselves or to somebody else?
To ourselves. Well, to ourselves and to our families. And I mean, I can describe that in a minute, but absolutely. But first and foremost to ourselves, to admit that we're struggling, and show ourselves a little bit of self-compassion, in that struggling. Again, this getting back to my, kind of, feeling like we don't need to be optimal parents right now. We need to be the best parents we can be, acknowledging what an incredibly stressful situation that we're all in. So I think that's first and foremost, is just acknowledge that we're struggling, try to be forgiving and compassionate towards yourself. And then of course, where you can, try to take care of yourselves and don't think that that's selfish. I mean, in my practice, I specialize in pediatric anxiety and depression and mood disorders. And I work with a lot of parents who have kids who are pretty psychiatrically ill. And, over and over again, they communicate to me that they feel like it's completely selfish, for them to care about themselves and take care of themselves when they have kids with such high needs. And so I am constantly trying to kind of correct that narrative to, communicate that actually that's the first thing they need to do, is take care of themselves, because you can't be a good parent unless your own needs are met. So it's not selfish to carve out time away from your children, carve out time to exercise, carve out time to get the sleep you need, even if it means less time with your kids.
And maybe even carve out more substantial time. I remember talking to Ginger Z, the chief meteorologist at Good Morning America, who's really struggled with a lot of mental health issues. And she did a 7-day stay at a psychiatric hospital, and she said it changed her life. And she wrote about it in her book, and she got a letter from a mother who said, I went decades knowing I needed this type of care, but never giving myself the 7 or 10 days to get it, because I felt like it would make me a bad mother. And she said, as soon as I did do it, she realized it was the first thing I should have done to become a great mother. And that switch has to happen, y'all. It has to happen. And look, I'm not a child psychologist, but I get a lot of emails from parents, okay? And they don't even think about themselves. I mean, it boggles my mind how much they are just, they don't even think about themselves. Think about yourself. Take care of yourself. Excellent reminder. Really beautiful. Donna, do you have anything to add on that? I think this is really important. We can keep talking.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really important to think about the fact, coming from a teacher perspective, you're giving the gift of self-love to your child when you're modeling this self-love and self-compassion. And so when we show this to our children, we're saying to them, I matter and you matter too. And so that modeling is really, really important. And always just trying to think, look, self-love doesn't have to be a martini on the beach. Self-love can be, 10-minute walk or just some time to be able to cook on your own in a quiet space with music going. It doesn't have to be these like vacations that are these amazing things or massages or whatever. So really being mindful about what makes you happy and feel good and being the best parent that you can be. I know for myself, when I take that time in the morning to water my garden, that is my time. I'm in my garden and I'm feeling good, and I can listen to music or some mindful meditations. I love Dr. Judy's mindful meditation.
Yeah, we're going to do one in a little bit. Yeah.
So it's, it's coming from, I'm a teacher, I'm your parent. I'm going to teach you. This is a gift I'm going to give to you and myself.
Woo. Excellent. Can't say it better than that. This is a very important question, so please think about it before you answer it. Can self-care be a martini on a beach?
Why not?
Okay, because I just need as many options as possible.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be that extravagant is my point.
Yes. Okay. Really excellent. Teresa, I would love to get your insight on this. I know you want most of it to be the panel, but you're up there. I'm looking at you. How can you honor value-based living in a co-parenting family where each household has different values and priorities? Oof.
Wow. So I think just as I'm listening to everyone speak, and I'm thinking about my own values, my husband and I, our values are fairly aligned. Maybe that's why we're still married. I don't know, after many, many years, but I think that one of the things I always have told my girls growing up, and now I've got 2 in college and 1 in high school, and the proof is in the pudding because I'm watching this play out right now, is that I would talk to them about why certain things were important to me, why certain values were important to me and to our family. And so when they were off making decisions by themselves without me, telling them what to do or whispering in their ear, I sort of installed this toolbox that they would pull from when they were in a situation in which they needed some type of guidance or wasn't sure what to do, or they came and did something that was different than what they were used to, a different value than what they were used to. And there's mom's voice in the back of their head reminding them of these are our values. Now they're free to find their own values, but once you've sort of installed, the concept that we are value-based, we lived by values. It's what we do with Girl Scouts with the promise and the law. It's why I love working at Girl Scouts, is that it's a value-based nonprofit based in the promise and the law. The promise and the law for my household is what I then share, and the way I model that for our family. And so my girls have, as adults now, young adults, the concept of values. And they're free to explore their own, in which they're doing, but they have a really good framework for the concept of values.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. Dr. Judy, I know you've worked with clients who have, homes with children going from one house to another week by week or weekends to week. How would you advise them, or what would you tell them if they were trying to raise their kid with values, but we have 2 homes with 2 separate sets of values?
Well, I think, again, it's really important to focus on the values being unique to everybody, and that it's okay if we don't all have the same values, but we have to respect the values of other people when they tell us what they are. And I think parents can really model that for their children. In this house, here are our top 5 values. It may or may not be your top value as a child, but these are the rules that this house has based on these values, like, courtesy and communication, how we structure our days, how we eat dinner at the table. One of the things that I recently talked to one of the parents that I work with is, the fact that in one household, when they have dinner, it's like devices are all over the place. There's no big deal. It's all good. And then the other parent is like, nope, we do not have devices at the dinner table. We drop it off at a little box when they come into the kitchen, and they're not allowed to pick it up until they're done with meals.
Yeah.
And, sometimes children will say, well, it's not like that at mommy's house, or it's not like that at daddy's house. And it's like, okay, well, that's fine. Those are their rules. And here are our rules, because I have certain values. And these are the rules that are built from those values. And when you're here, these are the rules that we're gonna play by, because these are dad's top values, or these are mom's top values. And I think as long as you can keep that communication line clear, and that you can say that it's okay for people to have different rules in different houses, and just open the door for that direct communication, because kids are gonna have sometimes exasperations, frustrations. Well, why is it like that? And I think that that's why it is so important to talk about values. It's not just because I said so. It's like, well, because this is important to dad. And it's important for us to have quality time. Dinner is one of the only times where I really get to talk to you guys and really have your undivided attention. After dinner, I let you guys do whatever you want for a couple of hours before you go to bed. And so that's all I'm asking for, 30 minutes where you respect dad's values. And then the rest of the evening, I'm respecting some of yours. Like you're going to play video games, maybe, or watch TV show, and I'm letting you do that.
Yes. Really great. Dr. Judy, let's stay with you. And then Dr. Amy, I'd also like to get your thoughts on this. This is from a submitted question. I'm going to read it verbatim. I have been attributing my 12-year-old's recent and completely random emotional outbursts and episodes of unprovoked tears to the onset of hormones usually expected at her age, but could also actually be COVID fatigue. And does it matter for purposes of how I as a parent should react? Dr. Judy, let's start with you.
Yeah, it's a good question. And, sometimes it's so confusing. Like, is this a developmental phase, or if this is a bigger problem? We don't always know exactly what's causing it, but we just need to address the problem as it is. And I think that sometimes parents don't realize that the little messages that they give their kids, the kids really absorb that and take it with them. And sometimes parents are trying to be good cheerleaders for their kids. And they'll say, well, don't be upset. You've got all of these amazing things happening. And it's meant to feel encouraging, but actually sometimes what the child hears is my feelings are not being validated, or that it's not okay to talk about negative feelings.
Yeah.
And so again, once you start to know that that could be an interpretation, and oftentimes is the interpretation of the child, it's good to just back up, take a deep breath, and instead of going in there, because I know as parents, you want to fix your child's problems, and maybe that's one way that you want to fix it, but just back up for a moment and really take your time and just ask them, why is it that they're feeling that way? What is it that they're feeling?
Yeah.
Have them just open up and talk to you. If they have a hard time talking about it, sometimes you can model that and say something first. You know what? Mommy's been feeling really stressed lately too. And some days I don't want to talk to people either. And I don't know if you feel that way sometimes, like you're so stressed and yet you don't really want to talk about it. Do you feel like that's you? Just open up the conversation. And before making a statement, always ask questions first. I also think that it's really important to practice active listening. That also gives you a little bit of time before maybe you say something that sounds judgmental to your child, even if you meant it as something good. And so active listening just means that you're reflecting back what you're hearing. You're summarizing and paraphrasing. This is a therapist tool. And so if the child is saying, well, this happened at school, instead of saying, well, don't care about those girls, like there's bad girls everywhere, it doesn't matter, because again, that could come off as dismissive, even though you're trying to solve the problem. Just say, well, what I'm hearing is these girls at school are bothering you and they're really stressing you out. Is that right? And they'll probably say, yeah. And then they'll keep going. And that's how you get that information out of them and help them to process the information in a healthy way. And then at the end, ask for permission to give them some solutions. Is it okay if mom or dad suggest some things that you can do that might make you feel better? And then if they say yes, that's when you can impart some of your advice.
Excellent. Dr. Amy, would love to hear your insight on that. And then Dr. Amy, I got another question for you, so you can go quick.
Yeah, I mean, I completely 100% agree with everything that Dr. Judy said. I think the only thing I might add, and this might be more relevant for younger kids, I think the original person who asked the question, I think was asking about these kind of unprovoked outbursts and kind of episodes. And I think what sometimes happens, particularly with younger kids, but also sometimes with older, transitional adolescents as well, is that kids don't always have the language to express describe their emotion. So it might actually further provoke them if we start
Yeah.
asking, well, how are you feeling? What are you feeling right now? What are you
How
thinking?
frustrating, right?
That can be helpful if it's an older child who has, who has that language and has that ability to articulate. That can be incredibly helpful. But I think, to Dr. Judy's second point, I think what can be helpful for younger kids is not just reflecting, doing the active listening and reflecting what you hear them saying, but also what you think they might be feeling. So,
Mhm.
I often coach parents to say, wow, like if a child is having, this kind of meltdown, emotional outburst, it's not really clear what triggered it. They're not really able to describe, what they're um, thinking or feeling. Like, wow, you seem really frustrated right now. Um, you seem like you're just having some big feelings of anger. What can I do to help?
Right.
And I think really, and you might run the risk of them saying, like, no, like, I don't feel anger. That's not what I'm feeling. Like, they may react, but I think particularly for a younger child who may not have the language to describe their emotional experience, it can be incredibly validating. And I totally
Mhm.
agree that validating and not fixing is what you want to do in that moment. It can feel, very validating just to get down on their level, look in their eyes, and try to reflect to them what you're seeing and what you think they might be experiencing.
Lots of great takeaways in that answer. Thank you, Dr. Amy. This viewer is asking, or saying rather, one of many challenges during the pandemic has been weight gain. My son eats all day and has gained 20 pounds. I keep fruit on hand and encourage drinking water all day, but inevitably he finds whatever sweets we've stashed away. I must admit that I do not have a handle on this. Working from home, we really don't get out much. Their break schedules don't always align with my work schedule, so I can't take them outside, especially because there are other people who use the outdoor space that's available to me. Are there some easy prep menus, recommended snacks, or ways to help him make healthier choices? Not alone in this question. Lots of parents are struggling with this. Dr. Amy, what do you think?
So, I mean, with my psychologist hat on, one of
Yeah.
the things that I would want to try to explore is, what is that weight gain and kind of increased eating really about? Like,
Yeah.
is that a manifestation of worry, of anxiety, of boredom, of loneliness? Because I often think that a lot of the weight gain is probably a symptom of something underlying, of an underlying mental health issue. And if we can address that underlying mental health issue, then the weight gain will probably improve.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying it's necessarily a mental health issue, but it could be. And so I'd probably want to, try to explore that either, as a parent or with the help of a professional, just try to see if there's kind of something deeper going on, that the child that this, child is kind of acting out through
Yeah.
increased, appetite and weight gain.
Yeah.
If it's just a matter of just being sedentary and being in the house and not getting out, then I think it just becomes behavioral intervention, and it's hard, but I think you have to, take sweets out of the house altogether. If he or she is finding them even when they're locked away, then I think you may just have to kind of take more drastic interventions, scheduling time to exercise and get out of the house, even if it's really hard and it's hard to fit in, but trying to make it work.
Yeah, I look, I have started a new workout regimen every Monday for my entire life, okay? But in the last 6 weeks, this is week 7 actually, I have finally consistently worked out 3 days a week for the 7 weeks, and it's because I only work out for 30 minutes on Monday and 30 minutes on Friday and then an hour on Wednesday. So I just found the very minimum I'll actually do. I was like, I don't even know if this is going to do anything, but I'm going to try it. And it is, I mean, just been incredible. And I only share that to say, this does not mean we have to eat broccoli for breakfast and train for a New York marathon. This just means maybe 15 minutes on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we go play dodgeball in the backyard somewhere or something, it's out there. Donna, you seem like a very social person, even though I've only met you right now on this panelist through Zoom. So this question is going to you. I bet you can relate to it. Are you a social person?
I am, but I'm actually pretty shy as well. There's that
Oh, look at you. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Well, this person says my daughter is a social butterfly, but has no one to socialize with other than her big brother, who does not have an appreciation for singing, dancing, or all things pink. So this whole school year during distance learning, she has craved opportunities to talk on camera with her teacher and her friends. But of course, this can't happen all of the time. So how do I help her find connection in this new world?
Yeah, this is a really good question, and it's a difficult thing to do. I think that what we have to do is we really have to look at who your daughter can connect with. Is there a coach? Is there another teacher? Is there someone else in her life that you trust, that you think there's a good relationship with? You want to really get your child to understand that there are lots of people in the world that they can lean on, and that you feel good about. So, even if she hasn't been playing sports during this time, or hasn't been able to take the music lessons that she's wanted to take, still connecting with those teachers at this time, just socially, is going to help. And I also think, I've found with my boys, I have always limited video games, but when this pandemic hit, we kind of allowed that. And we wanted to look at how they were connecting with the video games. So are they just on there isolating by themselves, or are they actually on FaceTime and playing with other friends? That's connection. That's okay. So if we're finding new ways to connect, I think it's the best thing that we can do for our kids, and asking them, always asking, as that parenting journalist, very curious, always wanting to ask questions. How do you think you can connect better with your friends? How can I help you? What might be a way that we can connect? Even if we have to stay socially distanced, might just be meeting, at the park and having some ice cream and talking, trying to just give a little bit of leeway as much as you can to get them to connect. But ask them, what do you think? How can you connect better with your friends?
Let's take this a little further then, because I like that, and that is so powerful. What about for the child who is in isolation with their family for this last year? They are angry. They are locking themselves in the room. And in some instances, they're yelling at their parents, saying, I hate you. Why are you doing this? Get out of my life. How do you, as a parent, what do you do in that moment? And then what do you do long term?
Big, deep breath in that moment. As a
Oh
parent.
my God. Yeah, Lee, I might need the martini on the beach in that moment, honestly.
And really not reacting to it, and knowing that they're struggling and they're going through something. And so instead of kind of getting into it, to really kind of pull back, give them the space, give them the time to kind of work through it, you've got that space. When you're ready to talk to me, come to me. I want to hear what you have to say. We don't want to force it. Even though we talked about wanting to fix, there's a lot of times where my boys are upset and I want to fix it. And I have to fight that urge to really just pull back and say, give them the space.
How did you learn to fight the urge?
I don't always fight the urge.
Sometimes you just, I get it.
Sometimes, you just can't. You can't stop yourself. But if you're mindful of what you're doing and you're really present in your parenting, you're going to take these strategies and you're going to say, okay, 2 out of 4 times I can take that step back. And so that's what you want to do. Just keep practicing and practicing. And your kids are going to see, oh, she's giving me the space. Okay. And they'll come to you, or you give them an amount of time where they, you said, okay, I've given you some time. Let's try to work through this. Let's go take a walk. Let's talk about this.
Yeah. Love that. So great. So great. And by the way, hats off to all the parents out there. Man, you guys really just nail it. Again, I'm not a parent. I have friends who are parents, and I look at you guys as heroes. When I see parents, I just go, man, they're doing something I couldn't do. So good for you guys. This is a great question. Let's go to a triple board certified clinical psychologist, Dr. Judy. One of the things we're seeing manifest in our 6-year-old in light of the pandemic living has unfortunately been a heightened sense of anxiety around germs, a lot of cleanliness issues. She saw us cleaning door handles and wipe groceries for months, asking if something is okay to touch or if it's okay to eat it, etc. It breaks my heart for her. We would love for her to be able to we'd love to be able to counter influence this somehow, or at least keep it from manifesting into greater anxieties down the line. Dr. Judy, what is your insight there?
Well, such a great question. I think it's very, very relatable. And obviously, again, kids are always watching you and they're always learning and they're wondering what's going on. And it brings their anxiety to the surface, especially if they see that you're a little bit stressed, trying to clean everything and making sure the house is good for them. And I think that in these situations, it's really important for parents to say, reassure them that the adults are the ones who are doing everything that they can to help the children to survive and thrive and be safe.
Mm-hmm.
And that there's a couple of things that they can definitely do, like make sure that they wash their hands, frequently. And obviously, if they are out and they're touching, high contact surfaces, that it's always good to maybe use some hand sanitizer. But aside from those types of behaviors, that really let the parents do the worrying, keep yourself safe, but you do not have to start thinking about everything else in the house. You don't have to think about parents' safety because it's a parent's job to think about your safety, and just really allowing them to be children, but still take that self-responsibility for the things that they can really do. I think it's also important to give them some age-appropriate education about why this is happening, and that it might not be like this forever, but right now everybody has to be a little bit more careful, but that does not mean that the world is completely unsafe. And again, if you're scared, your parents are the ones who have your back, and let us be the parents and let us worry for you. If they actually observe that you look like you're a little anxious, I think instead of denying that that's true, because you want your children to develop their social emotional barometers. And if they're reading an emotion right, denying that emotion is going to confuse them. So if they say, well, but you look so stressed, like,
right,
not be stressed. Don't then just say, I'm not stressed, because that will confuse them. And that again is kind of like refuting their observation. So to just say, well, do I? Wow, I didn't realize that it was so obvious. Just so you know, mommy is a little stressed, but that doesn't mean that you should take on my stress. I have to think about you. I want to protect you, but don't worry. Mommy is okay. Mommy has other adults to talk to vent about this stuff. And the only reason why I look a little stressed is because I want to protect you, but that's not your problem. That's just trying to be a good parent. And, if you're observing that, you're right. You're right. Acknowledge them for actually identifying an emotion correctly and letting them know, again, redirecting that it's not their job to worry about you, but thank you for caring.
Yes. Excellent, Dr. Judy. Dr. Amy, I want to ask you this question, and then we're going to have a video, and then we're all going to have a quick mindfulness meditation with Dr. Judy. So, Dr. Amy, how do you handle a child who doesn't want to go anywhere, doesn't want to do anything socially because of the fear they have developed from being isolated with their parents for so long?
Yes, that is a great question. And I think something that a lot of parents are going to be dealing with, because honestly, it's totally normative, kind of given the level of like shutdown and isolation that we've all experienced. Kids are smart and they're picking up on, there's something scary out there in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for, us to just expect them to all of a sudden kind of go back out there, it's very normal for them to have a certain level of fear about it. So in my clinical practice as a psychologist, like when I treat a kid who has clinical anxiety, what we do is something called exposure treatment, which is basically this way of kind of in a very graduated, planful way of continually exposing kids to the things that are fearful or that induce fear in them. So, and we typically do it kind of in a from the things that are kind of easiest and least fear inducing to the things, and work our way up to the things that are really scary. So what I would say in this case is that, even though the child isn't necessarily experiencing clinical anxiety, you might think about taking the same approach. So I think you would want to start with not, maybe make a list with them of like, okay, let's make a list of all the things that scare you and then put them in order of all the things that scare you about going out into the world, and then put them in order of what kind of scares you least to what scares you most. So maybe like, taking the dog for a walk around the block is kind of, least scary, and going back to school, and being around a ton of kids that they haven't seen in forever is most scary. And so then I think you just start small, start with that walk around the block with a dog. Then maybe the next week, take them to a playground and see, and I think what you're doing is just gradually, in a kind of very deliberate way, introducing them to the things that feel scary to them, but in a gradual enough way, and with kind of support and scaffolding and kind of coping skills that will allow them to have success experiences and to see like, oh no, I can do this. Like, oh
So
look, I
good.
just went to the playground for an hour. Like
Yeah.
I, and then slowly they'll be able to kind of continue to face the things that are scary to them using that same approach.
Really wonderful. Excellent. And nice roadmap there, Dr. Amy. Perfect. I know exactly how to use that. We've talked a lot about the importance of asking compassionate questions and being an active listener. I'm going to toss right now to a short video clip explaining more, and then we'll have a progressive muscle relaxation session with Dr. Judy. But right now, here's that clip.
Else, right, from your own frame of reference. So if you're suffering, Kyle, I want to be able to understand your suffering through my lens. What would that feel like? What Kyle's going through, what would that feel like for me? And that's a way for me to relate to you. But I would want to go one step further to say, how can I help Kyle as a result of this, right? Like, I want to do something actionable. And we don't realize, but listening is an action step. Listening without judgment, without filters, right? Without wanting to impose our own point of view onto somebody else. I don't want to change you. In compassionate listening, I want to be with you. I want to be in your presence. I want to be able to receive what you have to say and give you space, give you a container in which you get to dump, if you will, unload what you're experiencing.
Okay, everyone. I thought that was such a great point, that listening really is an action step. And I just wanted to start to bring this session, closer to an end by actually teaching you another tool that you can use for yourself and teach your children, which is progressive muscle relaxation. This is an evidence-based tool that is really helpful for achieving mindfulness and reducing stress. And it's a really great meditation to use with children. If you enjoy this exercise, if you just Google progressive muscle relaxation or progressive muscle relaxation for kids, you will see tons of YouTube guided meditations that are great, of all different lengths, and also a lot of different versions of it in terms of PDFs and scripts that you can utilize. So we're going to do a really quick one today. This will take under 5 minutes. And we're going to talk about what progressive muscle relaxation is. This is an exercise that relaxes your mind and body by progressively tensing and relaxing muscle groups throughout your body. And you'll tense each muscle group, but without straining, and then suddenly release the tension and feel your muscles relax and feel the difference. If you have pain or discomfort at any of the targeted muscle groups, you can feel free to omit that instruction. And throughout this exercise, you might visualize the muscles tensing and a wave of relaxation flowing over them as you release that tension. And it's really important that you keep attention to your breath throughout the exercise. So let's begin. Go ahead and find a comfortable position as you're sitting, or if you want to, I guess you can lie down also in a location that just really feels calming to you. Close the door if you have to. And now allow your attention to focus only on your body. If you begin to notice your mind wandering, bring it back to the muscle that we're talking about. Now take a deep breath through your abdomen, hold for a few seconds, and exhale slowly. And breathe in again. Have your lungs filling with air. And breathe out. And keep your attention on your breath as I read the rest of these instructions. Now let's start by tightening the muscles in your forehead by raising your eyebrows as high as you can. And hold that for about 5 seconds. And abruptly release, feeling that tension fall away. Now smile widely, feeling your mouth and cheeks tense. Hold for about 5 seconds and release, appreciating the softness that you now feel in your face. Now tighten your eye muscles by squinting your eyelids tightly shut.
And hold for a few seconds. And release and open your eyes and relax. Now gently pull your head back like looking at the ceiling and hold that position for about 5 seconds. And now go ahead and relax your head and neck. And now tightly, but without straining, clench your fists and hold this position for a few seconds. And now release and feel the difference when your hands are relaxed. Now flex your biceps and feel that buildup of tension in your biceps. Hold for a few more seconds and release and shake your arm out. Now lift your shoulders up as if they could touch your ears. And hold for a few seconds and quickly release and feel the heaviness in your shoulders and let your shoulders relax. Now tighten the muscles in your stomach by sucking in. Hold for a few seconds and relax. Now flex your feet, pulling your toes towards you and feeling the tension in your calves as you're doing it. Hold for a few more seconds. And now relax. Feel the weight of your legs sinking down. Now imagine a wave of relaxation slowly spreading throughout your body, beginning at your head and going all the way down to your feet. And just notice if there's any other areas in your body that feel tense right now. And if they do, you can repeat the exercise of tensing that particular muscle group and then relaxing it again to feel the difference. Keep your focus on your breath as we conclude this exercise. And just know that there's a lot of different versions of it. We did a really quick one today, but hopefully you can get a sense of how important it is to understand the difference between tension and relaxation in your body.
Really, really wonderful. And also a pleasure to listen to Dr. Judy's voice walk us through that. So thank you, Dr. Judy. If you're not following Dr. Judy on Instagram, I highly recommend you do. She does lots of helpful things like this. You're at Dr. Judy Ho, D-R-G?
Yes.
Cool.
D-R-J-U-D-Y-H-O.
Great. So this has been such an insightful hour and a half. We're coming up towards the end here. For those listening live, you don't have to think of the best thing you heard today. That's too hard. You'll think about that tonight when you're taking a shower or something. But right now, think of one thing that has stuck with you. And I want as many people to answer this as well in the chats. And this is for the panelists. This is for the attendees. I'm going to do this as well. But just write one thing. And then after you write that, your big takeaway today, review the other ones. Because what you'll see is that the way this information is received resonates in so many different ways. And what you might have learned today, in a couple weeks, you might have a different realization or a different understanding that can aid you in so many other ways. This education that you received today is a seed, and it is growing as long as you continue, which you do by attending events like these, to care for yourself and those around you. So I just want to say thank you to Teresa for putting this on. Amazing. The whole team at Girl Scouts, Andrea and Sai, everyone that I worked with, Danielle, they're just phenomenal. And then of course, we all know how great the panelists are because we've been listening to them for the last 90 minutes. Now, that being said, I'm going to go write my thing in the group chat. Thank you for having me here. There is a survey coming to you in an email, so please keep your eye out for that. In that email, you're also going to have lots of other resources and tools at your disposal to use. And the conversation is going to continue on the Facebook group that Girl Scouts of Los Angeles have put together. If you need any information for that, you can check your inbox and email. We have 2 more virtual panels like this coming up, so please register and share those with your friends and family. And now, Teresa, take it away.
Thank you. Kyle, you are the best virtual moderator on the planet. You were amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you again to the panelists, Donna, Amy. I want to say thank you to our Girl Scout Ambassador Naomi, and a very special thank you to my co-host, Dr. Judy Ho, who I am so happy to also call a good friend. And if you felt like this was a good conversation and it was worthwhile and you got something out of it, please attend the next 2. We have one on managing stress, anxiety, and depression. And on May 19th, transitioning back to school and mitigating learning loss. Ooh, so important. And I also want to thank our many sponsors. I believe we have a card at the end of this to share with you their generosity. There we are. Thank you. And I just want to thank you all very much and have a wonderful day, and treat each other well.